Good morning. We are lighting the candle, a world that works, and getting ready to have a amazing time. Best day ever, always, right? So we do this and we have conversations that are designed to empower us. And if they empower us, we're pretty sure they're going to empower you too. So we'll cover all sorts of different topics. And today I was thinking that might be kind of interesting if we were to kind of dive into energy. And
Okay.
what I mean by that is that you've got these invisible forces, in the universe that have a very, very important responsibility in terms of tying everything together.
hmm
And they don't cast us a shadow, but quite clearly we know they're there. We can test for them, and they actually, gravity, love, energy, all that stuff, right?
Yep.
So when we think in terms of our relatedness to each other, those three things are very similar in terms of how they connect us. And they probably use some of the same pathways or same measurements. But today I really wanted to kind of like dive into the whole idea of what is our relationship to energy and what's energy's relationship to us and to all of the universe. Does that leave us
Hmm.
enough room to kind of like have a little chat?
That's probably more room than we would possibly know what to do with.
I think it's the field of all possibilities, right? So,
Yep.
so I think the main thing is that there have been wisdom teachings, for centuries and for
hmm
probably for millennia, that talk about how the people that spend an entire lifetime trying to understand their relationship to the all in all, if you will, that we are not separate from the whole, but we are the whole in one particle, as you like to say about the ocean, right? And
Yeah, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop.
there you go.
Yeah.
So when you think of it in terms of how people relate to themselves, there's a thrownness, I want to say, to objectify or thingify human beings, where this whole school of thought that we are a spiritual being in a human form, or are we a human being with a spiritual aspect to us? So those are kind of like the edges of the energy conversation, in my opinion. That
Mhm.
if we look at where information comes into our body, all the automatic and autonomic systems that we have that keep us breathing and our heart beating and the thinking, the 80,000 thoughts that we have no control over all day long. It's like, that's pretty prolific if you stop and think about it,
Mhm.
that there's energy that's creating each one of those little thought messages, and then the ones that we choose to empower by investigating or spending a minute kind of dwelling on. So I'm going to take a breath here in a minute, but the, the I want to kind of talk about the empowerment possibilities that are available when people realize that we are energy, right? And we share energy not by choice, just by definition. That's how it works. Our place in the universe is carved out because we are a unique individual. And well, you know what, that old saying that you matter, you
Mhm.
know, unless you're traveling at the speed of light, then you energy, right?
Yeah.
Kind of fun. So, what are your thoughts in that? I know you've done extensive readings, into ancient traditions, as well as lots of conversations with, the modern thinkers from the 1890s on.
Yeah, and some pretty amazing mentors. So I'll begin by saying the more experiences I've had and practices, whether it's, qigong or meditation or, Zen warriorship, whatever, the less qualified I feel to speak about any of this. Because it's just,
You become
it's
painfully
amazing.
aware of,
It's
of, of how vast the amount is that you don't know, right? You're
yeah,
aware of what
yeah,
you
and
don't
it's
know.
really humbling. So I always feel a little cautious in, it's almost like, proceed at your own caution. I don't in any way feel that I have anything figured out. Um, However, it's worth, sharing some insights and things that have been shared with me, and even, just the idea that really we're all the same energy. We're just loosely held together in ways that differentiate, differentiate us, whether it's a human or a table or, a rock. It's all the same thing. So, and the other thing that, um, one of the things my mentor said is when you actively look to understand your connection energetically to the universe around you, it immediately severs you from that connection. So it's like this kind of paradoxical thing where if you try to figure it out, you're actually isolating yourself from that connection. And a lot of the meditations, with various people that I've worked with, it's that letting go of that sense of identity and that sense of self and kind of just being open, you know, like an open focus thing, opening three or more senses at the same time. And that gets that thinking part to kind of calm a little bit. And, you get connected more into, just your place in the greater scheme of things and the value of that place.
I like it as a way to open the channels for active listening with multiple senses at the same time. The
Yeah.
humble would say that knowing nothing and being nothing is the essence of being everything. And so, although that sounds like gibberish and funny speak, the only way that something can take a space, according to Einstein, that all things, including thoughts, occupy a specific location in the universe at any particular time, and only one can be there in that space at a time. So the interesting conversation is how does one tune into the energy and the meditation and the openness, like the frequency of where the whole thing starts to bring some empowerment or make some sense in terms of just being calm or being open and accepting. And I've been studying a particular individual, a guy who I think he lived until about 1925. His name is Hanel, and I haven't heard it pronounced out loud, so it may be pronounced differently. Charles, I think his name is Charles F. Have you studied, the master key system at all?
I don't think so. No, it doesn't sound familiar.
I would recommend this to you. You can get it on Audible. And the neat part of this is almost every single self-help person all the way back to Napoleon Hill, and they all borrowed shamelessly some of his best ideas.
Hmm.
But the more recent one, there was a man in the 1990s who called himself Veronicus and had a multi-level marketing deal where he had done a tape series and some workbooks, and I think he was charging like 2 grand for this wisdom course, and he was calling it the Commonwealth method. But 80% of what was in it had to do with direct quotes. And oh, by the way, I didn't introduce you or introduce me. It probably would be nice, I mean, since this is our 79th or 80th podcast. I'm Bill Correll, and as usual, this is Ken Caputo hanging out with me today. So back to the thought. See, when you're flowing and you're free to have energy impact you, it means that sometimes you may be jumping around in your conversation. It means that there may not be a first, second, or third order in terms of the experience or in terms of bringing the language out. So back to Veronicus. Very nice 3 day long exercise, listening to the tapes. And he uses a metaphor of the captain and the crew, okay?
Mhm.
Where the crew is the subconscious, and the crew is the one who's out negotiating with the universe for everything that you ever dreamed of, and everything that you ever want, and they're listening and hanging on every single word that you say all of the time. So the power of positive speaking, the whole law of attraction thing, the fact that the crew is listening and they can't hear the word not. So it's very, very important in this model to ask for what you want and to very powerfully describe it, and very using affirmations and that sort of a thing repetitively. So the Veronicus model is quite different from Hanel in terms of how to relate to it over time, but this guy was genius. He made a very marketable and very commercial application out of having a correspondence course, right?
Mm.
That took place over 24 weeks. And every single week you would get a new piece of it. And then ultimately, years later, it all got combined into the book that's available that I mentioned earlier on Audible,
Mhm.
the Master Key System. So, what's inside of all of these things that cause us to think, Ken? When you're at a point where you can be so respectful of the vast areas where people have studied and forgotten more than you and I will ever know, and that some people consider us to have been pretty good studiers as well, right?
Mhm.
But we have at least an appreciation that the lifetime's worth of work that other people have spent getting to the point where they now can start to instruct people at ways of conditioning their thinking, at ways of learning how to meditate, learning how to bring themselves peace and quiet and empowerment. And I think that might be what you were pointing to, and I would say of the people that I know, you're at the head of the class in terms of at least having the methodologies and the steps that people can try many different ways to access this space of kind of being clear and possibly being thoughtless or being focused on a thought or creating a state relationship into a mind picture. And I think it's
Mhm.
fascinating. I really do.
Yeah, it really is, and it's an interesting thing because it's very much like if you're thinking just in terms of meditation, mindfulness, whatever words you want to use, um, it's kind of like nutrition and exercise. It's very unique to the individual. There are guidelines, but then you have to be willing to test things and not just implement what worked for someone else, because that may not work for you. We're all so different, so, and I think that's where for me a lot of the hesitancy, I say I don't know a lot when I'm working with people because I don't know, and it's and you don't know. We the only way we know is through practice and play, and then tracking trend lines for what it does for us. So, so for example, personally, I find the highest meditative state for me is through rhythmical, repetitive exercise. So, like walking, running, cycling, breath, the world goes away, and I'm just really connected in. For other people, it's sitting still in nature, just sitting by a lake and just doing breathing. And for someone else, it might be writing, or playing with their kids. I mean, we're all different and they can all get you there. So, so a lot of times it's just recognizing what going back to kind of connecting with the energy within you and around you. It's figuring out how you open that space for yourself, and the the wisdom traditions are great because it gives you different like pathways to explore, and then you just have to figure out which one works for you. The one thing that strikes me though, there's two kind of related martial arts kind of sayings. One is half of all power comes from knowing how and when to relax, and the other one is power is defined by a lack of resistance. So, and it's interesting working with people who come from a Western background, we tend to be a little bit more doers. So so it's like, how do I do it? How do I get the thoughts to go away? How do I make myself relax? Which isn't what you do. You have to figure out how to allow yourself to go into a state where relaxation comes, where the thoughts just naturally go away. And that can be really challenging. And, everyone's got to kind of, figure out how to do that if they're interested in it.
Yeah, I think, especially with most of the people that I know, the ones who are more interested in, um, let's say, public um, recognition, public uh, persuasion, being somebody who is considered to be someone who matters. A lot of TV personalities and radio personalities and talking heads on the news and that sort of thing. The West is really well schooled in force and domination, and the whole dichotomy of being dominated or to be the dominator, right? And so most of the, like you said, the doing it turns out to be some version of force, and which they
Hmm.
misname as power. He's a very powerful person. Well, how do you know that? Because he makes people listen to it. No, that's nonsense. Power is the absence of force. Power is the natural order of things anyway, that in order for the energy to flow through you and flow through the other people that are around you, there's no force. It's a dance. It becomes this, kind of the way it was explained to me that I like to say is it becomes this delicious experiment for which there are no rules. And the moment that you try to impose rules, you're now back into the domain of force. So your best conduct is to create this opportunity for nothing. This wide open space where all you are allowed to experience is the next natural thought or feeling in your body that isn't being directed by one of the superficial subconscious thoughts that is telling you something that you know is contrary to what's really so. Thought distortions,
Hmm.
that sort of thing.
Yep.
We all have those little thoughts like, I'll never be able to lose weight, or I'll never be financially secure, or I'll never be lovable enough for that person. All of those things are, we listen to those messages as if they're the truth, and they're the
Hmm.
exact opposite of the truth. And there are cultures where people don't have to find something wrong with themselves in order to be able to coexist with other people. There are cultures out there where that is possible.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure that I've ever met anybody from there, but I've read some pretty interesting books and stories about villages and that sort of thing, where there are no rules per se, and the conduct of people is always what's good for everyone. What would that
Yeah.
look like?
Yeah. It'd be an interesting thing. I think it's always interesting. It seems like the more moving parts, the more challenging that becomes, and the more individualistic and independent the group is, the more challenging it becomes as well. But there's also a lot of value to that because that's where a lot of innovation and, all kinds of new energy can be created out of that sense of, being willing to think differently from the group or push back against norms, that kind of thing. So you're right, it's a balance thing. It's funny, how many times do you find yourself in a try harder mode, where we've developed a skill set, and when things aren't working for us, we like double down on that skill set. And we do like one of the little programs I do is a 5 animal mindset multiplier thing. So it's taking the 5 martial arts animals, but thinking them as like solution minds. So if you have someone who's kind of skillful at being tiger-ish, they're really direct, they say what's on their mind, they lead from the front, they're just, that kind of strong, confident and competent person, every once in a while they run into something that they're not successful with that, so they get more tiger. It's like, I'm just gonna push through this, or I'm gonna hustle or grind or outshout or outwork whatever it is,
Yeah.
and the interesting thing is, if you offer them a remedy, which a lot of times what we recommend is crane. So instead of being more tiger, let's balance that with crane, which is more listening, empathy, relying on structure instead of strength, and just like calming. So, and then all of a sudden, it takes away the resistance that they're feeling, but the instinct is to just do what we already know how to do and just do more of it. And if we don't know that we even have a choice to do something else, that's what we find ourselves. So I'd see that with people who were, like going into work with people on basic relaxation skills, and they're trying to figure out how to breathe, which right there, they're in trouble. But they're like, how do I make, I'll just do more of it. I'll do more diaphragmatic breaths. I'll be more relaxed. And it's like, you're right. It's contrary to what will actually work, but it feels like it makes sense, so we just keep pushing in that direction.
Yeah, you're spot on, and that's where our thrownness as a culture, to employ force. And I mean, you see this, when people are not speaking the same language. I mean, like somebody who typically would speak French is listening to somebody else who's speaking English, and the English speaking person thinks that by speaking more loudly with more volume that they would be understood better, as opposed to no,
Yeah,
the language makes no sense. It's not how you're saying it. It's the words might as well be just, babble, right?
it's so
So,
human though, because if you only know English, what are you going to do? You're going to try harder to use English to communicate. It's such a human thing. It's so fascinating.
yeah, and where the real access is more like playing, charades and miming and using pantomime and demonstration and all these other techniques that are not verbal language. They're more what's the same between us, Can you even imagine? And it's like where you're describing this sort of a toolkit, in my view.
Mhm.
It's like the old saying that he that's good with a hammer thinks everything's a nail, right?
Right. Yep.
And
Yeah.
all you ever need is a bigger hammer, right? So the other part of it is if you think about life requiring that you show up with a toolkit, that when you're in the downtime mode, all of these things that we're talking about, these practices and the things that will prepare you, for the unexpected, it's a little bit like, when Tiger Woods goes on to the golf course. The rules say he can have 14 clubs. He gets to choose which 14, and he has spent every available minute of every waking hour that he can dedicate to becoming good with each one of those tools in its specific application, and then being able to use those tools in ways they were not designed for. This gives you that breadth of knowledge where power can come into a situation and a solution, as you were mentioning before, that the problem no longer seems like a problem. It seems more like a puzzle. It seems
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
more of like, let's see what we're made of here. How do we go about making this bad boy, you know? Uh, and so the whole idea with having to act on something where the actual solution comes from being fully ready for it to completely presence itself and act on us. In order to make something disappear, you have to have it be fully present. And when it's not, there'll be something that's still there in the back of your mind that's gnawing at you, or some sort of a physical. I call them sticky notes, but you want to attach something that you don't want to forget to some sort of a physical object. That can be a piece of clothing. It can be a friend. It can be pictures. It can be a dozen different things. But when you pick something up and you hold it in your hand and it reminds you of something that you haven't thought about in 25 or 30 years, that's what I'm talking about. It went into
Hmm.
a thought time capsule to come back out and jump out of the darkness at you, you know, with either a really good feeling or a really bad feeling sometimes. So the idea of having a metaphorical golf bag with 14 clubs in it, and that your job is not to get good at carrying the bag. Your job is to get, you know, really intimate with the details of the functionality and the usefulness of each one of those tools, because the bag of itself
Yeah.
has no utility.
Yeah. Yeah. And the purpose of what you're focused on is getting the ball in the hole, you
Yes.
know? Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny, as you say, flashed on when you're cycling and you're going up a really long hill, like you're on a climb for a while, you can actually shift your hips forwards and back on the saddle and kind of recruit different muscles. So if you're closer to the nose of the saddle, you can use a little bit more quad. And if your quads are getting tired, you can shift back and use more like glutes and hamstrings. So as your legs are getting fatigued, you can kind of play with how you can rest, different muscles, or you can stand up. But the point of all of it is to get up the hill, you
Yes.
know, and as the hill gets more challenging, you have to get a little bit more creative about how you keep moving, so that you can get up the hill. And if you don't get up the hill, now you get back to practicing and figure out how to be more effective the next time you try to go up that hill. It's not like a failure, it's just information. So it's it's a really interesting thing. And there's someone I've gotten to know over the last year, just brilliant guy. He talks a lot about the sunny side and the shady side of the mountain,
Yeah.
and and how some of us live more on the sunny side where it's kind of more action based and more doers, and then others are more on the shady side where it's more contemplative and a little bit more receiving energy and just kind of hanging out in that space. And whichever side you're on, the opposite side is also necessary, and it's the dynamic interplay between the two that actually creates this illusion of balance, you know, and then now you're riding the bike, I mean, any moment you can fall off the bike. You're not really in balance. It's just the combination of motion and rest and efficiency that keep propelling you forwards, you know? So, and I kind of liked that. I, usually hear yin and yang, but he likes to break some of the paradigms we have existing associations with. So, so he'll just talk about, you sound like you're hanging on the sunny side of the mountain right now. You should walk over to the shady side. And it's kind of cool. I found it helpful. So it might be an interesting metaphor to play with.
Yeah, there are dozens of those. You can
Oh
find
yeah.
one that allows you to become the observer again in your life, as opposed to the one being acted on.
Yeah.
So, with that said, so for example, um, I think one of the techniques that I used to use as a supervisor was to gamify corrective action. And many times, if I would sit down to have a conversation with somebody about an unacceptable behavior, I would start with a story, and I would tell them a story about something that was reported that they did without making them a character in the story. I would just say, if, you know, if you were an observer in this situation, um, how would you correct it? If you were, let's say, to put your arm around this person who did this thing, or it was at least perceived by other people that that thing had been done, because almost all of the misbehaviors are conversational.
Hmm.
Rarely, they're either procedural in a process or they're conversational. But the things that get you noticed are not doing everything that you're supposed to do all the time. It's the things that don't fit, you know? So,
Hmm.
as you said, the corrective action of where you're going to sit on the saddle and which muscle groups you're using. And so it's all practice, all of life. Every
Yeah.
single moment is practice. We're
Yep.
always in this becoming stage. We say we're human beings, but we're, and this isn't I wish I'd have thought of this first, but I'm not old enough to say that. We're human becomings, And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so if we're always going through, turning from a caterpillar into a butterfly, if we have that idea of ourselves, that there's something beautiful here that's always in the process of becoming, and if we could view other people in that way, the energy that we share and the energy that we, uh, well, I'll say the power. We're going to use those two interchangeably for a moment because we actually do. Electricity, energy, power. All three of those things are like the same thing, right?
Hmm.
And the electricity is actually the measure of power or energy. And so if we're in a position where we're reviewing our human becomingness, if we're thinking in terms of, I'm not supposed to get this right every time. As a matter of fact, the more I fail, the more I learn. I don't learn anything from succeeding. Succeeding is an
Hmm.
event for which nothing got changed, nothing got better, nothing got, it just worked, okay? And that's not instructive for most people. So you always find the people that are so process oriented. Let's find a way to, disrupt this. Let's find a way to make it not work on purpose, and see how durable it is. Let's see how hard it is to take an empowerment or a powerful place to be in the universe and shift it into force. And I've been playing with this for a little while, so if it doesn't sound like it's quite thought all the way through, I'm still working on it. But the point being, the relationship that we have between what seems to feel good and what seems to not feel good or feel bad, because those are usually the two domains that we put things, that's good or that's bad. Well, if you take an economic look at it, there's no good and bad. There's a cost or a benefit. And
Yeah, the Buddhist practice, they refer to it as skillful and less skillful.
yes,
Yeah. So it's just, so by nature now it's not this either or black or white thing. It's just a spectrum. And it's where are you, and it's sliding constantly. So where are you at the moment? And that's impermanent and can be changed either through internally or externally, you know?
yeah. However, there's one thing that's got to happen in order for any of that to happen, right? You have to be a mindful observer. And
Yeah.
the best analogy that I can have is that we live our lives as if what's going on out here from the skin out is a television screen or a movie screen, right? And whatever's going in internally, whatever's going on internally, we view that as, our thoughts. We view that as our world. We view that as our particular private side. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And more often than not, where the world really starts to get good is where people are no longer interested in having an inside or an outside, but they're now interested in having all of our sides be part of this beautiful tapestry that all comes
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's not a question of handing something to somebody and having that exist the same way through time. It's more about, all right, so here's what I'm saying, and now what have you got? How do what's your ingredient that you're going to put into the mix here,
Hmm.
so that as we're looking at this, we're all kind of co-creators of this beautiful conversation.
Yeah. 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 And actually the co-creator, that's an interesting thing too, because there's another, I guess you could say, oscillating dynamic. It's the center of gravity between I and we, which are both necessary. So when are you in a place of I where you're focusing on yourself and your contribution or manifestation or whatever? And when are you recognizing that as part of that tapestry you're talking about, where it's really not about you? Like the Zen practice of no trace, where you basically you influence a situation without anyone having any knowledge of the fact that you were even there. You just did it because it was the right thing to do. We talk about that in teaching a lot. When you're in support, your your purpose is to help the class have an amazing experience without necessarily drawing attention to your contribution to that experience. Someone else is in the lead role, so they're the ones we want everybody focused on. So you're trying to practice that no trace principle. So, and again, it's interesting. Sometimes you need more we, sometimes you need more I, or you become ineffective, and it's just this constant, navigation between those two.
It's kind of an interesting thing. This is all language, and
Yeah. Yeah.
what we're painting is this wonderful picture. And I'm left also with the thought of the whole notion of leading from the back of the room or leading from
Hmm.
behind. I think the leading from behind thing got corrupted much the way that some of the other things, that were said in the 70s and before got corrupted. For instance, like, the proof is in the pudding. Well,
Hmm.
I don't know which proof you're talking about, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating of it.
Yeah.
Is it any good? You can't tell until you've had a taste of it, right? So it's a completely different saying than the proof is in the pudding, or the proof of the pudding is in the eating. You have to have these experiences in life. And then there's the other one where I hear people talk about out of the box. Her thinking is really out of the box. Well, what that meant to me back in the old days is like instant milk, plain vanilla, unbranded, good old whatever generic it was came out of the box, and it's outside the box. And the outside the box actually came from a demonstration where, connecting 9 dots together with 4 straight lines. In order for that to work, you watch people struggle, putting lines between 9 dots. But in order for you to do that in one continuous stroke, you have to go outside the 9 dots, outside the box. And so, see, now, again, don't hear me like I'm being right about that's the only thing this can ever mean. I'm just saying that the outside the box to me it's a whole distinction that could be talked about for minutes, hours and days. There's seminars in terms
Hmm.
of how to view where you are in terms of just the model of the 9 dots. And so, I mean, there are people who have been paid fortunes to demonstrate how to place yourself intentionally outside of the box,
Hmm.
because it's not a natural action for people. They want to be able to assimilate, and what we also call the state of being unconsciously competent. We want to be that for all things. However, when we are unconsciously competent for all things, I think that's like, 5 minutes after they start throwing dirt in our face. We just can't be alive and be competent at everything. We're not going to be, that good. It's just, and who would want to be? That's not a
Yeah,
lot.
that sounds stressful.
It doesn't sound like a heck of a lot of fun. It
Yeah.
sounds like one of those movies where the person knows the answer to every question and finishes every sentence that the other person is saying. Uh, However, it's just, again, it's not one that's where there's power, where the power actually dictates the next natural action based on the ingredients that are there now, not the prescription of what was there the last time something got said and it made sense.
Mm.
That makes
This
sense.
is Yeah, this is a little tangential, but just thinking about becoming competent at all of these things. Seth Godin wrote a book called The Dip, and it was really, really cool. And the point of the book was quit early or don't quit.
Yeah.
And he talks about, like, when you start something, there's that. It's kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's easy, because you don't know what you don't know, and you're just coasting right along. But then you go down into a dip,
Yes.
and it's climbing out the other side of it. That's where the real the real value, competency, mastery, all that stuff comes from.
Yeah.
And his whole premise was, because we can't become competent at everything, the value is in recognizing that this is a dip you're not going to want to climb out of, and quitting before you go down into the dip. you know and
That's
it was really, really interesting. And actually, I'm working with a group right now, and it's part of it is designing the ability to make it easy for people to quit a course right at the beginning if it's not resonating with them, without feeling like they need to complete it because they started it. And it's just such an interesting thing if you give people that ability to be okay. I mean, honestly, that's what Quester's Way was about. We had all the different offerings so that you could try something, and if you didn't fall in love with it, you could not do it. And there were other options. You weren't removed from the environment because you thought you would like learning to play chess and realize that you were more interested in breakdancing. That's okay. You had permission. You could give yourself permission to be okay with recognizing that, and you know changing. you know but isn't it interesting how hard it is when we start something to be okay with quitting it, and then you end up kind of all these half done things, none of which you really feel very good about.
Well,
you
see,
know
that's the thing, and that's again a demonstration of power and force, because power is having the ability to be informed by recent happenings that would give you better information about what you want to continue doing.
hmm
And then guess what? You don't have to have a story about it. You
yeah,
just,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that wasn't working. I'm on to something else now.
Yep.
However, I reserve the right to come back and address that bad boy sometime in the future if there's
Yeah,
some
yeah.
reason for me to do so, right?
What's funny? It's more likely. I lost count of how many both kids and adults would choose to not do something, and then a year later they came back to it,
Sure.
and because they didn't feel bad about having chosen not to do it at the time, so it like kept the option open.
Yes.
And when circumstances were different, or they were in a different place, or for whatever reason, they'd come back and try it again you know
Well, see, and see, this is really a very important and potentially useful part of this conversation. That if people have a very healthy relationship with their own personal failure, it's not going to be something that gets generalized into a character flaw. It's
Mhm.
going to be something that gets generalized into some decisions. And if those decisions bring about the next good thing that you want to have in your life, and that you're now active in terms of working on that without invalidating yourself as a life's practitioner, our culture, I say, is not good at giving people a free out, as you were saying, to where they could say,
Yeah,
no, I'm not loving this. And my goal in life is to always be and everywhere be amazing. This is not how I experience being amazing for the
mhm.
most part. And I'm willing to stick in here, through the bad bits to have the good stuff happen afterwards, provided I see that there is some possibility there. So when there is no possibility, you have two choices: keep doing what you're doing over and over again and expecting a different result, or stop.
Yeah, yeah. Being a quitter isn't always a bad thing. I
No.
mean, and it's interesting how I know in my world, in my life, that was a terrible thing. You didn't ever want to be associated with a quitter. You never gave up
And
on anything, and I think that was kind of detrimental to my my well-being at times. So
yes,
I'm sure other people have had similar things where they could just feel, whether it's a relationship, or an activity or job, and they're feeling that sense that this is not the right circumstance for them, but then either someone or something inside themselves kind of puts them in that place of force, where you're forcing yourself to keep at it or whatever. And it wasn't the best decision.
yeah,
You always learn from it, but
yeah.
maybe there were easier ways.
Yeah, and the neat part of our lives are, um, we're not the sole judge, jury, and executioner in what happens next.
Yeah.
We rarely are in that position. And if we are in that position, it's usually something that we say that is not, in fact, true.
Hmm.
So the whole neat part of all of this, again, we're talking about being mindful, being both an observer and practitioner, and in such a way that we're going to be a self coach, if you will. If
Hmm.
looking for an out in a situation or a conversation or some type of an endeavor or effort that's not producing any forward progress or anything that's worth producing, to be able to be awake enough to say, all right, what now? What's next? And when someone asks, well, what did we do wrong? Or another one of those questions that sounds like it's going to be a postmortem to figure out, whose fault it was that it didn't work. Then there's this whole new opportunity to create a new door into another part of the house that's called, what do we learn by things that don't work?
Hmm.
What's the experience? And as you said before, the whole idea of killing yourself, going up that hill the exact same way every single time, and you think that's all you can do, that's leaving so much of life on the table, unexperienced
Hmm.
and unsatisfied. And our job, according to going all the way back to our Mr. Hanel, our job is to have all of the abundance that the universe already has for us. You know that old saying, where the guy dies and he goes to heaven, and Saint Peter take has him choose a door, and he chooses the door on the left, and in there are all these wonderful things that during his lifetime, you know, that meant something to him. And then he says, "Would you like to see what's behind the other door?" And he opens the other door and he says, "These are all of the things that I had planned for you, but you never asked." And it's
Mm.
everything, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you think about being disempowered or being at the mercy of force, it's going on in between our ears. It's not going on out there. It's never going on out there.
Hmm.
And I'm resting on, our one of our five fundamental rules of the universe is that in any moment there are infinite possibilities of ways to experience that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are you experiencing it? You know,
Yeah.
where do you go, to seek relief from the pain? You
Yeah.
don't have far to go, you know?
Yeah. I remember writing a post um, about it, just called "The Moments That We Miss," and it was I've been reading one of Michael Singer's books, and he was talking about, if you just think of like our physical presence and awareness is like walking into a warehouse with infinite shelves with infinite things on the shelves, and all you have is a flashlight. So you can illuminate like one part of one thing on one shelf, and you can't see anything else. And the minute you move the flashlight, the thing you were looking at is gone and illuminates something else, but you can never see it all, you know, but it's all there, like you're saying. And it was just kind of an interesting thing because, again, there's that balance between recognizing infinite possibility while also recognizing you can't experience it. So not being paralyzed by it, you know, so that you can be in a present moment state of appreciating what you are experiencing and the way you're choosing to experience it, and letting that be enough, you know.
Absolutely. And the inspired outside the box thinking would be to take the flashlight and spend a few minutes looking for the wall switch that illuminates the entire warehouse,
Yeah.
or invent a wall switch that illuminates the entire warehouse. The your analogy is so rich with possibility in terms of people finding a way out. Isn't that the
Yeah.
whole thing? The Chinese finger, whatever you call those things, the harder you
Oh,
pull,
yeah,
the
yeah,
more
yeah.
it
The
rips.
hard yeah, exactly. Yep.
And at the end of the exercise, the only way to get out of this feeling of being with your finger plug stuck into a wall outlet and being negatively energized to where you have no other thoughts available is just to relax.
Yeah.
Let it go, just surrender in that moment and find out what's really happening out there and give yourself all the credit for creating a moment that really didn't work for you.
Mhm. Yeah.
What fun.
Happens.
Can you imagine a whole room full of people all having an aha moment where they all just kind of stop for a second? Wait a minute. Let me listen to you first and hear what you've got to say because what I'm hearing in my head isn't working.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
picture a whole room full of people that are there to try to get something done and arguing with each other, and nobody's listening.
Yeah. I've been in the aha moment, the room of the aha moment.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Actually, we would do this thing when we would start our teacher training where everybody kind of sit in a circle. Yeah, you might have like 30 or 40 people there, and I we'd have everyone select like a little polish, like a river stone.
Yes.
And because our thing was always drop a pebble, make some ripples. So so we'd begin by holding this stone, and we're sitting on mats. We're usually in the martial arts space, the matted space, and we just have everybody kind of imagine w- the contribution that they had to give to the community, the school, the students themselves, all that kind of stuff. And then they just let it go. They release it. We would all drop the pebbles at the same time, and they hit the mats, pretty close together. And it was crazy. You could literally feel it in your chest, like this vibration. And everybody was thinking about different things, but we were united by like kind of a common focal point and environment. And it was so funny because every single one of us, every year, for years, they did this.
Yes.
We'd pick them up and do it again because it felt so amazing,
Yeah.
and it was just such a cool, simple little thing, but it's what you're talking about. It's just everybody kind of, and we didn't throw the pebble. We didn't talk about it. All we did was release it. We just opened our hand and let it fall. And then everything else took care of itself. It was really kind of a fun metaphor.
It sounds remarkable, and I can just picture it, having been in that space myself.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Never done the pebble uh, form, but the neat part of anything that allows people to experience a uh, a moment that is so similar for all the other people in the room. And then the really fun part in doing something like that is if people can go away for a moment and record their thoughts about what just happened and
Hmm.
how it felt for them. And then come back and share it with each person going around and saying, this is what I saw and what I experienced. And the neat thing there, and I'm now taking what you're talking about and kind of superimposing some of the other things that we did in groups to find out that yes, there were the common experiences, like the feeling in your solar plexus that is just that's that initial thing, and then the feeling that gets acted on in terms of all your life's experiences that are different than everybody else's in the room, and to honestly share what your reactions to that moment were.
Hmm.
And that allows the pebble dropping in that experience to now have more richness and have more unbelievable. I had no idea that that kind of thought could happen by a human being. You just blew my mind completely.
Yeah.
And that's
The other thing I was kind of, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's the interesting part of life, and we're talking energy. If we're stingy with our listening, and we're stingy with our ability to share moments dropping pebbles with each other, we're the ones that suffer.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say that the physical pebble, you talk about energy and the forms it takes,
Yes.
that, we would all keep those for a year. So you had like this anchor that symbolized that feeling. And when you felt, like you needed a compass, you felt like you were losing your way a little bit, you could kind of hold the pebble and remember, so it connected you back to that experience and helped you just kind of navigate, towards where, the contribution that you would let go of, you had a reminder of what it was. So it was kind of cool having that like physical thing. I would always keep it near me or in my pocket or on my desk or whatever,
Yeah.
just as a physical reminder.
Yeah. Yeah, I think people in general have little keepsakes. I mean, I've got a couple of coins
Yeah.
that I've been schlepping around for. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got one coin in my wallet. I believe I've showed it to you, that I've had in one form or another, in the same place for going on 40 years.
Yeah.
And just taking it out and holding it in my hand gives me, a recharge of whatever energy I left in it the last time I put it away,
Hmm.
you know, which is
Yeah.
kind of a remarkable thing. But there's kind of a cool relationship here. We're talking about energy. We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And the lighting of the candle is something that in and of itself is a spiritual practice. The
Hmm.
whole idea of taking responsibility for the wellness of our world coming from us, as
Hmm.
opposed to acting upon us. Like we're in a world that doesn't work. Well, if you feel that way, then what is your responsibility and accountability in the matter of your own life working?
Yeah.
And if you can be the author of your own life working, imagine what that demonstration makes available for other people that are around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know, my friend, anything else today?
No, I think this is a good one. This was fun.
Yeah. I'm feeling empowered. How about you?
Absolutely.
So, ladies and gentlemen at home, we're just sending you the best vibes we possibly can generate right now, and we are challenging you to always be amazing and have the best day ever. And come see us again real soon. Bye bye for now.
Bye bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Xvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at xvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.